All right, everybody, it is time to find out, was it worth it? This is the 200SX parts car that we got, and it is somewhat stripped down. If you come inside the car, my dad was up here, and he was quite bored, apparently, and he stripped down the interior significantly, which is great, because we need all of this rear interior stuff for our car. But you know that we got this for the purpose of getting the rear differential out of it so that we can put it in our car and hopefully have a car that actually works. Okay, a car with a differential that actually works. Let me slow down. So the question is, was it worth it? Well, it's only worth it if the differential works, but there's also the other factor of like, is it worth it trying to part out a car like this to try to make your money back? My unfortunate observation as of now, not worth it. I have so far sold the spoiler, which is pretty desirable, and the gauge cluster, which it had the digital cluster and it worked. Those are the two things I have been able to sell and are basically the only two things that people are truly interested in. And we've made back about $300. So in essence, we're talking about a $1,000 purchase for a differential. So that is, of course, super nerve-wracking because it's a used differential. We have no idea if it's going to be any better than the one we took out. Here's the original one here. I could open it and show you, but really there was no visible damage, just the slightest bit of wear on the teeth of the ring gear, but so minor. But there's no obvious, big play in the gear set or anything like that. Nothing different than what the one we put in had. So it's really a crapshoot on if it's going to be better or not. Just real quick, I'm going to run through the process of how I got this diff in and out for anyone out there that found this video and is like, hey, how do you actually get these diffs in and out? Here's how I did it. All right, so there she is. It has, at the front, 4 bolts on the drive shaft, and then 4 long bolts that go through that rear subframe up into nuts on top of the differential. And then it has 2 studs at the back. This plate is interestingly slotted, so you actually don't have to take the whole hanger off, which is great because it's way up here by the spare tire well. So you can remove these nuts, and because they slotted this, but then provided this little bracket, you can actually slide the diff down. But that's a little bit cart before the horse, because you have to get these axles out. And the axles are pretty interesting on the R200 long nose like this. It splines into the rear differential, so there's no bolts on this side, unlike the R200 short on a 240. It has the bolts down there. So there's 6 bolts and nuts down at that end, and you can see that there's basically no access for that, which is not a huge deal because everything has to give way in order for the axle to actually have enough droop to come out of the differential. So here's what I ended up doing. So caliper off. You don't necessarily have to take the e-brake cable off, but it would make it a little easier. That gives you access to the head of this bolt, which you do need to take out because you need to take out this bolt and this bolt for the shock in order to drop this lower control arm, I don't know, shock adapter, if you will. It also has a 17 mil, so one big 17 mil at the front, one big 17 mil here, and one here. All 3 of those come out, and then this can pivot down. So if that pivots down, you can see it gives you access to the bolts for the differential. So you can get this out of the way, but that being said, you do need to get these bolts loose. So you're probably going to want to stick the calipers back on. That's what I did. And just use the handbrake in order to hold it so you can get those bolts loose. So getting those loose is only part 1 of the job. I ended up taking the springs out, letting it go to full droop, using a little compressor. You could do it by hand if you had a buddy to help, but I'm doing this all solo. Take that spring out, and then you can use a jack on a good point like here, or I did it below the caliper there, to jack this all the way up so that you can pop this down off of the plate that it's on once you get all the bolts out. And once you do that, it gives you enough room to get the axle out of the differential and be able to, you know, pivot it down. If you don't let this, or if you don't get this all the way up, you have got to squeeze this axle together all the way, and you're guaranteed to lose all of your CV axle grease because of a cool little thing that I learned about these. So these are the axles. Well, this is actually one axle out of the other car, one axle out of this car. See this little plate right here? This guy? It's only held on with these tiny little tabs. And that's the whole thing. That's what holds all of the grease inside of the differential. Inside of the CV axle. There's also a little spring inside of here that keeps tension on the balls of the CV. So if this thing pops off, it's really not a great time. Is this the one that just wanted to go? No, must have been the other one. Well, trust me, you want to try to keep that in there. You're probably going to squeeze some grease out just collapsing it at all, but my suggestion for you is definitely do what I say, not as I do, and first time around, go ahead and take everything out, take the spring out, and jack that corner all the way up before you try to take that out. Other note is the passenger side is longer than the driver's side, so do make sure you know which one is which if you're going to put it back together. Not a comprehensive guide, but hopefully some tips and tricks if you're trying to do this yourself, and maybe you'll have less agony than I had. But for now, I'm going to try to get this thing on the ground, and let's go take it for a drive and see if it howls and see how sad we are. Alright, let's see. Already, I would say that sounds better. Alright, that's 60. At 60, it howled before. Perfection now. Zero noise. It was sort of worth it. Yay! It was still entirely too much money for this car, but at least it doesn't howl. Yay! What a relief. Oh, ZK's gonna be so relieved. Alright. Well, we won't go far because, like I said, we have like no fuel and it still runs like a doo-doo poo-poo. But at least we know one of the major issues that kept us from driving this is resolved. What a relief. Hey, does anyone want to buy a long nose R200 that sounds like a supercharger? It's for sale! It is making 0 boost today. I don't know what that means. On the gauge, anyway. I don't think that's real. But I would say something ain't working up there. Let me take these out. I must have something blocked off. That the boost gauge is just like all the way left. Alright, diff. The very slightest hint of a whine. 140,000 miles on a diff, sure. We put the back seat and the interior in there, we're gonna be golden. Well, next, standalone ECU, brand new wiring harness. Let's get this thing to run. I don't know when it's gonna be, but that's where this project is going. Also, if you need any parts off a 200SX, let me know. Hooray. That's
in the ignition. Key is in the ignition.
A victory.